In this clip, I will show you how to draw realistic hair by going through step by step a speed drawing of the musician Harry Styles. I will also show you how I applied layers with Faber Castell Polychromos to achieve the realistic effect. So before we get started on the techniques that I used to produce the hair on this portrait, I want to make you aware of a few things. The first is all of the resources that I used in today's clip. You will find these in the description below. There is an area called resources used in today's clip, so that is where you will find all the resources that I used. The second thing is that if you are interested in buying the original pencil portrait of this Harry Styles portrait, or if you wanted to buy any merchandising, for example textiles or ceramics or stickers or a print, then you can visit my shop and you will find all of those items. There is a link in the description below. So on to the technique. I have been using primarily Faber Castell pencils, and the reason I like to use them is they are really good for layering. And I started by blocking in the dark colours. I looked very carefully at my reference image to get those colours. And when you are doing any drawing, it's a really good idea to start big and finish small. And by that I mean look at your image, pick out the tonal values, and by that I mean your dark tones, your mid tones and your highlights, and then block those in, which is the stages that I'm doing now. And then when you're finished with your tonal values, you can then start adding what we call the small, which is the individual hairs. And you won't draw each individual hair, you would just add areas of interest as you get to that point. So I'm going to show you now the layering of all the colours. You will see when I add the colours that there are some colours that you might question and think, oh, that's a bit of a strange choice. Why is she adding a green, for example, when it's dark brown hair? But when you have a look at someone's hair, you will see that there are slight tones of green sometimes, especially with blonde hair. Funnily enough, there will be undertones of green, and that's why learning how to layer is a very important technique with pencil shading, because it's about getting that blend completely right. You'll see here that I'm adding some slight darkness of tonal value where the hairline is, and the reason for this is you don't want this sudden darkness and that stark dark hairline going straight onto the light skin tone, because that would look very abrupt. So it's really important that again you look at your reference image and see what the dark tones are, what kind of hue or colour tint they have to them, and then choose your pencils to match that colour tint. You will also notice that when I was looking at that top area of hair, I started to block in with the darker pencil first. You could use a dark brown. I've chosen to use black, and I've used that as my guide for adding all of my other colours in later in the drawing. So at this stage there are a cluster of hairs on the right hand side that need to be represented. So I'm going to draw these as I see them and add the tonal values to make them look more realistic. It should be reminded that if you are doing a drawing like this, you need to think of breaking it down like shapes, because then it will make it look more realistic. If you draw what you think you should see there, so if you were drawing what you think you should see, you would probably have started drawing individual hairs, and then that's when it becomes less realistic looking. As I mentioned earlier, you need to start big and finish small, so that's why you need to look at your image, your reference image, break it down into areas of tonal values, and then you can start adding the details at the last period of time where you are actually working on the image. So it's at that last stage where you start adding all of those final details.
Yeah.
So now for the finishing touches, and this is where you go in small and add all of your details. I am going in with light coloured Caran d'Ache luminance pencils. I could use Prismacolor, but I've decided that I want to get as fine a point as possible, and I'm going in and adding the lighter hairs, and then at the base of each of these hair sections I'm going in with a dark Faber Castell because, as I mentioned, I want to get a sharp point. So as I mentioned earlier, the Faber Castell is very good at working for long periods of time with a sharp point, and that is why it's good for drawing details such as hair. The reason for this is because it's oil based, and that means that it will work for really long periods of time to a hard point. So that is Faber Castell. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm going in with the light details with the Caran d'Ache luminance because it's an opaque pencil. It will show those highlights up much better than the Faber Castell Polychromos because it does have a lot of transparent qualities to it, which is good for some effects, but for the observational study that is not a good effect to have. If you would like to learn how I drew the eyes of this Harry Styles portrait step by step, click on the clip at the top. If you would like to learn how I drew the skin tones on the face, then click on the clip at the bottom. If you would like to buy this original picture or merchandising, then check out my shop in the description below, and don't forget to subscribe so that you can catch more content like this.